Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Thursday, everybody. Yesterday, Wednesday, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, who has proven to be one of the more China-critical voices in the EU leadership, gave her State of the Union address. In the speech, von der Leyen announced that the EU will launch an anti-subsidy probe into Chinese electric vehicles, expressing, quote, "Global markets are now flooded with cheaper Chinese electric cars. And as we do not accept this from the inside, we do not accept this from the outside. I can announce today that the Commission is launching an anti-subsidy investigation into electric vehicles coming from China. Europe is open for competition, not for a race to the bottom. We must defend ourselves against unfair practices." End quote. Of course, Beijing will not be very happy with this. Its heavily subsidized EV industry will be vulnerable to such a probe, and Chinese leaders see EV production as an important future industry it wishes to dominate, and the EU as an important market. State-run Global Times said that the move, quote, reflected the EU's biased mindset toward Chinese manufactured products, end quote. UK-based Financial Times, citing an unnamed source, writes that the investigation has been planned for months and that the EU's concerns regarding China's electric vehicles trade practices were conveyed by von der Leyen to Chinese Premier Li Qiang in a bilateral meeting on the sidelines of the G20 summit in New Delhi last weekend. Regular viewers will not be surprised at all by this move, of course. We've been expecting it for some time. The French have been heavily advocating for it, and the Germans dreading it. US-based Politico writes that the announcement, quote, follows months of pressure from Paris and its proxies in industry and the European Commission to launch a probe into insurgent Chinese e-car makers that have stolen a march on European manufacturers, end quote. And on the German side, US-based New York Times writes, quote, the association representing German automakers urged caution in response to the inquiry. The industry is heavily invested in the Chinese auto market, the world's largest, and a trade war with China over electric vehicles could cost them more than they stand to gain. End quote. Indeed, the German Association of the Automotive Industry warned yesterday, quote, possible counter-reactions from China must be taken into account. End quote. Commentators also argue that this announcement gives the EU Trade Commissioner important leverage in his negotiations with PRC counterparts in an upcoming visit to Beijing on the 25th of September. Next up, and on a similar theme, that is Western businesses in China, we're going to discuss two important US companies very reliant on China, both of which have seen significant developments in recent days. The first is Apple, who we remember took a $200 billion hit in their market cap last week after reports that China, Apple's largest foreign market, was expanding a ban on government workers using iPhones in the office. Yesterday, Tuesday, in response to a question about these reports, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson gave a very carefully worded reaction. Quote, China did not issue any law, regulation, or policy document that bans the purchase and use of cell phones of foreign brands such as the iPhone, end quote, which, technically speaking, is not a denial of these reports of restrictions. Quote, we should have data very soon on demand for the new iPhones, but given the state of the economy, the quality of domestic brands that are more than good enough, the new Huawei phone, and the surge in nationalist support for it, I think the odds are weighed towards a downside disappointment for Apple. Even more important for the company is that these restrictions may be an indication that the confidence many had that Apple is able to navigate US-China tensions to avoid any material blowback could be increasingly misplaced. End quote. On this final point, this brings us to the second company to briefly discuss, Elon Musk's Tesla. Regular viewers know that the US billionaire has actively courted a good relationship with the PRC, having recently visited the country to inspect Tesla's massive factory in Shanghai and meet with senior Chinese leadership. As one commentator observed today, Musk has tens of billions of reasons to be very careful to never say or do anything that might upset the PRC government or stir up anti-Tesla nationalist sentiments. In a piece called 9 Wild Details from the new Elon Musk biography by American technology journalist Cassie Newton, it demonstrates that Musk is indeed acutely aware of this. The following is from the Newton article, which itself then directly quotes an excerpt from the new Musk biography. Quote, Musk privately acknowledged Twitter would need to be careful about China. After Musk took over Twitter, some observers wrote that his international business ties deserved more scrutiny. Among the top concerns was that Musk would have difficulty resisting calls to remove posts critical of the Chinese Communist Party due to the fact that China is a major market and manufacturing site for Tesla. When Musk brought in independent journalist Barry Weiss to write an installment of the Twitter files last year, she pressed him on the issue. Musk had brought her in to tell the story that Twitter 1.0 executives had improperly restricted speech on the platform. But wouldn't he soon find himself in a similar position in China? Isaacson writes, then quoting the biography directly, Musk got annoyed. That was not what the conversation was supposed to be about. Weiss persisted. Musk said that Twitter would indeed have to be careful about the words it used regarding China because Tesla's business could be threatened. China's repression of the Uyghurs, he said, had two sides. Weiss was disturbed. They moved on to other topics. End quote. And speaking of sensitive topics, next up, Taiwan tensions. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed today's episode of China Update, don't forget to hit that like button. Liking, sharing, subscribing are all huge helps for the channel. And for anyone who can go the extra mile and help me keep the channel financially sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Thank you so much everybody for the ongoing support. We end today's video with Taiwan Strait developments. This week, the Central Committee of the party and the State Council released a joint official statement aimed, quote, at deepening the cross-strait integrated development in all fields and advancing the peaceful reunification of the motherland, end quote. While at the same time, the People's Liberation Army sent 20 naval vessels near Taiwan, including an aircraft carrier. The figure is the most in data going back to August of last year. It appears clear that Beijing is making a carrot and stick gesture to Taiwan as its people head into a presidential election in 4 months' time. The jointly issued circular listed 21 specific measures for building the, quote, greater integrated development between Fujian and Taiwan, end quote. The objective, said the document, quote, is to make Fujian the first choice destination for Taiwan residents and enterprises to pursue development on the mainland. Trade and investment across the strait will be smoother, and cross-strait exchanges and cooperation will expand to more fields and in greater depth, end quote. State-run Xinhua reported that Beijing will encourage Taiwanese firms to list on Chinese stock exchanges. Other state media articles were a little more blunt. Quote, the document comes at a time when the Taiwan authorities continue to trumpet separatist rhetoric and act as a U.S. puppet to achieve the U.S. strategy of containing the mainland, which is ruining the development of the island and undermines peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. The document is equivalent to outlining the future development blueprint of Taiwan Island, which is expected to gain a broader driving force and development prospects by integrating with Fujian, end quote. Meanwhile, in Taipei, the Ministry of Defense published its biannual report warning that China's upcoming third aircraft carrier, called the Fujian, quote, poses a substantial threat, end quote, explaining, quote, unlike the CV-16 and CV-17, the first two carriers, aka the Liaoning and the Shandong, the Fujian shows that the Chinese Communists are entering the stage of constructing their first flat-top battle group, meaning they are preparing for far sea combat operations, end quote. The ministry is warning that the People's Liberation Army's rapid expansion of its coastal air bases facing Taiwan also, quote, included 3 from where warplanes could fly to Taipei within minutes, end quote. The report also warns that Beijing is increasing, quote, grey zone harassment activities, end quote, observing, quote, China has increased the scale, frequency, and intensity of drills and exercises against Taiwan to strengthen its operational preparation to invade us, end quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a good Thursday, and I will see you all tomorrow.